Welcome everyone to our webinar, The Next Business Performance Management Requirement, Ease of Use. The various attributes of ease of use that we will be discussing in this webinar are the keys to user adoption and overall adoption in the organization, as well as to full utilization. So the reason we're hosting this webinar is that we strongly value ease of use in software applications. In the latest BPM Pulse Survey that Craig Schiff, our guest speaker and CEO of BPM Partners, will present, ease of use was rated as the top attribute in budgeting and forecasting solutions. We at Accelerant provide a cloud-based budgeting and forecasting solution designed with an easy-to-use interface that makes complex processes accessible for all users. And our ideal client is a small to mid-sized organization who values collaborative environments as an effective way to engage employees and achieve their strategic objectives. Many people just think of ease of use as a design element only and don't even realize there are other aspects to consider. The customers that we work with, and you'll hear from two of them today, understood the value of engaging the end users. They needed a way to tap into the expertise and knowledge that their end users have in order to help reach their objectives, and ease of use was fundamental to making that happen. And just a housekeeping note, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can note them in the question section of the GoToWebinar pane. And if time permits, we'll get them to the end of the webinar, or we will follow up with you personally afterwards. So I'd like now to introduce Craig Schiff. Craig Schiff is CEO of BPM Partners, a vendor-neutral advisory services firm that helps clients address their performance management challenges with a comprehensive, rapid, and cost-effective methodology. He was a founding member of Hyperion, which is now part of Oracle, and spent 16 years as SVP of its Products and Services Group. More recently, he was co-founder and CEO of OutlookSoft, now a part of SAP. Craig was also a founding member of the BPM Standards Group and is a recipient of the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. He has spent more than 30 years focused on budgeting, forecasting, consolidation, reporting, and analytics. He has contributed his expertise to CFO Magazine, AQPC, Association for Financial Professionals, Institute of Management Accountants, Industry Week, TechTarget, Information Management, TDWI, and other leading finance and technology-focused publications and conferences. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Joanne.
And our two panelists on the webinar today will be sharing their real-life experience with Accelerant's budgeting, forecasting, and reporting product called BudgetPack. However, the stories they will tell are applicable to any software purchase, since ease of use, or lack of it, has significant impact on user adoption and overall success of the rollout. So making a decision to purchase new software, especially if one is going from no software, typically Excel spreadsheets distributed and cobbled together, to a purpose-built solution can be intimidating and feel risky to many people, which often results in organizations doing nothing and remaining stuck with an unworkable process. By listening to two of your peers talk about their process, our intent is for you to gain some insights into the importance of ease of use and what to look for. So first, I'd like to introduce Minden Dickson, who is the Director of Financial Planning and Analysis at Hunt Companies. Minden has spent most of her career in the real estate industry. Prior to joining Hunt, she was in budgeting and forecasting with Prologis Real Estate Investment Trust, which specialized in commercial real estate. She's been with the FP&A group at Hunt Companies for 11 years. Hunt is a privately owned company focused on development, investment, management, and financing of real estate. And Hunt has been a customer of Accelerant since 2012. Welcome, Minden.
Thanks, Joanne.
And Cheryl Warner, our second panelist, serves as controller at Northwood University. She was promoted to this role in 2013 after holding the position of Director of Budgets and Accounting at Northwood for over 25 years. She currently holds the volunteer role of Treasurer for the Legacy Center for Community Success in Midland in Michigan. Cheryl holds both an MBA and a BBA in accounting from Northwood. And Northwood was founded in 1959 with a mission to develop the future leaders of a global free enterprise society. And Northwood University has been a customer of Accelerant since 2010. Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi, Joanne.
All right. So let's now begin the presentation with Craig. So Craig, I'm making you presenter.
Okay. Hopefully you see my screen at this point.
you're good.
Okay, so today in our ease of use webinar, we're going to start by looking at the definition of ease of use. We all talk about it, but it's kind of a generic term, so we'll look at what it really means. There are different types of ease of use based on the users and how the system is being used. Spreadsheets, people question, are spreadsheets easy to use? And we'll look into that. Why is this all important? Why does it matter? What can happen if you have a system that doesn't have very good ease of use? And then once you understand why it's important, how do you make sure that you have a system that is good? How to select the right solution that meets your business requirements as well as supports your ease of use needs. Then we'll take a look specifically at some ratings that we have, some customer satisfaction ratings for various vendors in the performance management space, and you could see how they were rated on ease of use. At that point, we'll turn it over to the team here for a panel discussion, and we'll leave some time at the end for question and answers. So when we look at the definition, we turn to the International Organization for Standardization. And their definition is essentially a product that's designed for a particular group of users for a particular purpose to enable them to do it effectively, efficiently, and in a satisfying manner. So a purpose-built product that's effective, efficient, and satisfying to use is their definition of ease of use, which is closely aligned with usability. But what does that mean more specifically? So when they talk about an effective solution, it's one that ensures that you use it in a thorough and comprehensive manner and make sure all input, for example, that's required from you is submitted. Also to try to ensure that it's done accurately, so you put the numbers in the right place, reducing the opportunity for error. The efficiency aspect is really the resources required, the number of people it takes to maintain the system, the amount of time you need to spend using the system, and then the speed that you can use the system in an error-free mode. So how quickly can you get your job done within the system while maintaining that effectiveness of completeness and accuracy? And then satisfaction is a component of this, that you have a positive attitude as you use the system, you're engaged, you interact with it, and there are many benefits to that in terms of basically your attitude to using the system. If you go in kicking and screaming, you're going to use it in a minimal capacity. If you really enjoy it, you're going to take full advantage and do much more than the minimum that corporate requires. Another piece of the definition, which wasn't included in the ISO version, is really ease of learning. You want a system that's so easy to use that you need minimal, if any, training. Some people only use the system on a periodic basis, maybe once a year in the worst case, and even if they were trained, they're not going to remember it a year from now. So you want something that's minimal training required, but really is intuitive. You can pick it up, figure out where you need to go and what you need to do fairly easily. So at this point, let's take a poll on which aspect is most important to you. Joanne?
Okay, so we have 4 items, and I'm going to run the poll now. And you can select your top criteria for ease of use. And I'll give you about 30 seconds or so to answer that. Okay. And just about everybody has voted. Okay, so let me close the poll and then share it. So those are the results. Craig, can you see that?
I actually can't see the results.
Okay,
I guess.
All right. So let me read them. So effectiveness came in at 54%, efficiency at 25%, satisfaction at 4%, and ease of learning at 17%.
Okay, so clearly the message here is that it's most important that the system's effective. Obviously, when you can only choose one answer, all of these are desirable, but it has to be effective. You have to make sure people get the answers right and put the right information in. And quite honestly, all the others are really requirements to get to that goal. If you want a system that's effective, that's used appropriately, it has to be efficient with engagement and that's easy to learn. Are we back on my screen now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So let's take a look at the categories of ease of use. So there's two basic categories. The end users, which is by far the larger population, are going to be people in finance or other business areas of the company that are going to use the new performance management system. Typically, they're going to be entering data and running reports that corporate's required and that corporate's going to look at as well, but also reports for their own needs, some ad hoc reporting. But that's what the end user is going to do. They're going to typically work in the environment of entering information into the system and then pulling information out, running reports. On the implementation side, IT is typically involved if it's an on-premise solution where you have to physically install it on your own servers. Obviously, with the cloud solution, that goes away. But the ongoing maintenance of the system, updating the tables, the chart of accounts, the organization structures, writing new reports, typically it's a small subset of finance users that take on the system admin role, and their role, as I said, is really designing the system initially and then configuring it on an ongoing basis as things may change. So what you'll find is in most systems out there today, the vendors focus on the end user community since it's much larger. So you'll find when we look at the ratings later, many of the solutions in the performance management space get higher ratings on their end user ease of use versus the implementation ease of use. And again, that's a decision and a trade-off that many vendors made because they understand that there are many more end users than there are implementers. So it's okay if a small group has to work a little harder as long as the larger group does not. Now let's take a look at spreadsheets. People often say that's easy to use. You know, I'm currently doing it in Excel, I'm budgeting in Excel. They never really say they're happy about it, but they do say it's relatively easy, at least for the end users, not the people who are trying to consolidate those results and make sense out of them, but the people that have to enter data in. And I think what they're doing there is really confusing familiarity with ease of use. It's easy to use because you've been using it for many years. If you gave it to someone new who never used it before, I can tell you it's not easy to use. Very hard to figure out what's going on and what to do in there. So it's easy to use for power users that live in Excel and do a lot of their analysis in there. It's easy to use in finance users, for finance users who typically live in there, and at least if they're not power users, at least comfortable and familiar with how to work with spreadsheets. But once you go further and further outside of finance, people are much more casual users of spreadsheets, and it's not easy for them to use. And if your system's going to require them to use that, they're not going to be particularly thrilled, and they're not going to take full advantage. You know, will they typically know how to work with a pivot table, for example? I think not. I mean, perhaps they could fill out a template that you send them, but they won't be able to do much more than that. And then you need to look at the type of use. Using a spreadsheet as a standalone productivity tool is one thing. So for the power users and the people in finance, again, they're very comfortable and it's familiar, so they deem that easy to use. However, when you try to make spreadsheets into a planning and budgeting system, then it's not easy for anybody because it's not just using the interface now or using the functions in there. It's pulling together disparate spreadsheets that have been emailed around that people may have modified in some way, that have complex calculations that were maybe built by someone else. I mean, it becomes very unwieldy very quickly, and I don't think anyone would say as a planning and budgeting system, spreadsheets are easy to use. So why is this all important? Why do we care? Well, end-user buy-in and adoption is the key reason, because typically as you bring a new system into a company, people are resistant to change. I mean, whatever they're using today, however good or bad it is, they've been using it. They're comfortable. They know it. They don't want to learn something new. And for the people who are really good at it and are kind of the gurus that everyone else goes to, they're afraid of losing that key position with some new system that they don't know yet, and they first have to learn and become a beginner all over again. So there's reluctance. So you already start with that, and then if the system's not easy to use, people just aren't going to use it. They're going to do the minimal that they have to and not take advantage and really not do it with a lot of thought and heart in it. They will just do what they have to. So you really want them to be bought in and excited about adopting the new system. Ease of use goes a long way towards accomplishing that goal. Usage itself, you want them to do more than just the minimum. You just paid a lot of money for a new system. You want them to take advantage of it, find new ways to use it for their particular piece of the business, analyze their own data in new and different ways. And you also want them to do it in an error-free capacity. And again, if they're really uncomfortable with the system or going in against their will, the chance for error is much higher. They're just going to want to get in and get out, and they're not going to pay attention to how to do it correctly. Learning curve is important. As you're trying to roll this out and get new people up to speed, how long is it going to take if everyone has to be trained? When's the next training class? Does that fit with our budgeting cycles? And how much does it cost to keep training new users as there's turnover or you expand the system out? So let's take a look at some results from our research study from earlier this year. We have about 250 responses in there. The bulk of the respondents in this study were from finance. There's some of the titles on the screen. It was almost entirely in North America, this year's responses. And the company size, the bulk of them were in the mid-market with a small handful on the low end and about a quarter of them on the larger company size. So that gives you a sense as we look at the responses of who the respondents were. So one of the questions we asked is, rating on a 1 to 5 scale, with 5 being highest, the importance of each of these budgeting and forecasting and planning capabilities. And on this screen, we have everyone that's close to 4 or above. So obviously things that are very important to people. Top of the list, and this was the first year this was one of the options on the list to rate, was ease of use. It rose right to the top. So the people taking the survey, who are both current users of performance management systems as well as prospective purchasers of such systems, said ease of use is more important than anything else. Right below that is performance and scalability. It needs to be responsive, and you could argue that falls under the ease of use banner as well. If I'm sitting there looking at the screen for 10 seconds waiting for a number to come up, well, that's not a very engaging and easy to use system. Also supports financial ownership with a 4.28 here. You could argue is also part of ease of use. It needs to be easy to use for finance so they're not dependent on IT to use their new system. But this is a very clear message here from a reasonable sample size. Ease of use does matter and it is important. This question was asked of people who are in the process of selecting a new system. So not the ones who bought a new system already, but people in the process. What did they see as the greatest risks? And in this, they could choose multiple answers. You see the number one answer is the system doesn't meet expectations. Well, that's a fairly broad and generic term. That can mean all sorts of things. People don't use it. It doesn't meet our business requirements. It doesn't work the way we expected generally. But right below that, both around 48% over budget on software, but the one that's relevant here is lack of buy-in and low usage. So even people who are just in the mode of purchasing recognize that that's a potential risk. And I have to say, this is their perception going into it. The reality is that's probably a higher risk than some of the others. I mean, if you do this properly, you can get a system that meets your requirements. You can get it within your budget. But if it doesn't have ease of use, no matter how well you did in selecting a feature-rich system that you got at a good price, if it doesn't have ease of use, people aren't going to use it. It's going to sit there. It's going to land with a thud. So it is very important. So how do you make sure you get that capability in your particular solution? So what we did in this particular question is we asked people to prioritize the importance of each of these attributes. So it's a ranking with 1 being most important. So the attributes are listed across the bottom here, and then they rated them, they ranked them in order, so only 1 could be number 1 in each case. And the one that had the most 1, 2, or 3 responses clearly is ability to meet business requirements. Obviously, if the system's easy to use and doesn't meet your business requirements, it's also fairly useless. But first of all, it needs to meet your business requirements. Secondly, it needs to be easy to use. And then right behind that was finance self-sufficiency and so on and so forth. But you could see that almost 60% of the people rated ease of use as the first, second, or third most important capability. So how do you see that it's actually easy to use? How do you determine that when you're evaluating new solutions? Well, first of all, is it easy to learn? You want a system where there's minimal training requirement. You could ask the vendor, what is the training requirement for end users? You can look at it during the demo. Does it seem intuitive to you? Could you find your way around without training? Does it use business terminology? Does it talk about looking at sales for budget month August versus actual month August? Or does it talk about cells and rows and columns, which is not business terminology? Does it provide some online support if you do get lost? And a way to test that is to say, let me take over, let me drive the demo. Just if you can sit in the seat of the sales support person and take over and kind of walk through the system through its menuing, then it must be fairly easy to use and intuitive. And as we said, check the training recommendations. If it takes 5 days for an end user to learn how to use the system, either it has a tremendous amount of functionality, possibly more than you need, or it's difficult to use. So that's kind of a key. Does it have a task-oriented workflow, something that's going to walk you through the process? If you open up one of these systems and you look at 10 menu choices and then it sends you to a place to open files and pick worksheets, it's not easy to use. You want something that understands the business processes you're trying to accomplish in budgeting, in this case in particular, and it's going to walk you through that. It's going to tell you what steps to complete, what step you need to do next, and where you are. And a quick way to see that is when you're looking at the system, can you see what your status is? Where did I come from? Where am I now? And where am I supposed to go next? That's ideal. That makes it easy to use. You don't have to think about what am I supposed to be doing in here now. Is it unified? And people don't always think about this as a key selection criteria. Is it a single solution for budgeting, planning, modeling, reporting? Some vendors will sell multiple modules and they'll have different interfaces. You know, they're built by different teams or they came through different acquisitions. So you have to learn all those different interfaces, and that's not very easy to use, a lot more work. And on the back end, you need to integrate data between the different modules. So I entered my budget here. How do I get it over to the reporting tool over here? So the quick check is, does the vendor sell modules or a single solution? And did the modules come through acquisitions? Because if they did, it's highly likely they have different databases on the back end, different structures, as well as different interfaces on the front end, and that's not good. Unified solution is ideal. Sometimes vendors will sell modules just as a way to package and price it, so you don't have to buy everything all at once, but in fact they will share the same database and sell and the same user interface, so that's okay in those situations. Cloud. Cloud affects ease of use both on the end user side, but also on the implementation side. And we're going to take a look at that in a second, what that particularly translates into and why it's easy to use. A check you can do is if the vendor also offers an on-premise version, that typically means all they did is take their on-premise version and get it hosted somewhere. That's not the same as a true cloud solution that's architected from the ground up to take advantage of the cloud. And here's why you should care. What benefits, and this was asked of people who bought cloud-based performance management solutions, so it's people who've already made that purchase. What benefits have you received from that? The ability to access from anywhere, that's easy to use. It doesn't matter where I am today, I need to get on and do something in the system, I can, it's available to me because it's in the cloud. There's a new version, they've updated, they fixed something, they fixed a bug, they added a new feature. If it's in the cloud and it's a system really designed for the cloud, you'll have immediate access, if you choose to all the latest capabilities of the product, bug fixes and enhancements. It's easy to use itself. The interface on cloud-based solutions tends to be more modern. A true cloud-based solution was really written in the last several years. So if they're taking an old product and hosting it, it's not the same. But one that was written more recently for the cloud, by its nature of being more modern, the interface it takes advantage of more current thinking on ease of use and UI improvements. And you could read through the rest of the list here, but from an ease of use perspective, cloud is another way to ensure ease of use both on the implementation side and the end user side. And some additional extras to keep an eye out for: guided prompted workflow, where the system will actually ask you, what are you trying to do? For example, you're in the budget, how many people do you think you're going to hire into your department next year? And you answer 10, it'll set up 10 rows for you to enter the data for those 10 new hires. So if it walks you through the process, that's a step beyond just having workflow where you choose where to go next. It actually, based on asking you questions, knows where you should be going and what needs to be set up and doing that for you. Another plus is industry-specific terminology. So first of all, it speaks the business and user language as opposed to technical language. That's a requirement up front. But industry-specific terminology or experts who are helping to implement that understand your industry, or even starter kits or shell systems, again, that are designed for particular industries. There's a lot of commonality across an industry, be it higher education, financial services, healthcare, whatever it may be. And for the system to somehow build that in and take advantage of it, again, makes it easier to use. You'll recognize the terminology, and makes it easier to implement because things that are fairly constant across companies of those types are already built into the system. Coming back to Excel, the ability to leverage Excel, you do need to consider that. We talked about Excel being easy to use because it's familiar, but for those people, it is easy to use. So you don't want to cut them off from that. So that power user that wants to do his analysis in Excel, let him do that. So make sure the system can take advantage of that. And lastly, a topic unto itself that we can't possibly cover today, but just worth mentioning here, is collaboration. When you're preparing a budget, you do need to work with other departments, and most people do that outside of the system. If the system can facilitate collaboration, so services or manufacturing knows what sales is planning to sell, then their budgets will all be in sync, and it makes the entire result more accurate, more meaningful, and it makes the process easier for all concerned. So lastly here, let's take a look at some of the vendors in the space and see how they did in our BPM Pulse survey this year and how they were rated by their users. So the big three performance management vendors that everyone's familiar with, I'm sure: IBM Cognos, Oracle, Hyperion, SAP. Oracle and SAP, so this is on a 1 to 5 scale, so obviously the closer to 5, the better. Really 4 or higher indicates pretty good ratings. Oracle and SAP have fairly low ratings on ease of use, on ease of implementation, and their overall rating. Users were asked to rate 14 different attributes plus rate the vendor overall. So looking at the ease of use and ease of implementation, you could see how it correlates with the overall number as well. In the case of IBM Cognos, so normally the large users, the large vendors do get lower numbers here because they're trying to be all things to all people, and that's very difficult to accomplish. IBM Cognos these days targets an IT user community more so than a financial user community. And an IT community has different skill sets and different expectations, which is why I believe they did better than the other two on this list. But let's look at something more relevant. Let's look at cloud-based performance management vendors, and these are the three leading ones: Adaptive Insights, Host Analytics, and Accelerant. We bolded the highest rating in each area. As you could see, Accelerant in this particular grouping has a very high 4.5 ease of use. Adaptive Insights has the highest ease of implementation in this grouping, 4.22. And again, these are cloud-based solutions, so it's not about installing it on the server. It's about setting it up, configuring it, maintaining the chart of accounts and the organization structure. But Accelerant is close behind with a 4.17. And then when you look at the overall rating, Accelerant at 4.83 had one of the highest ratings in our entire survey. So that overall is taking into account the ease of use, but also price and value, functionality, customer support, training, consulting, and many other attributes. So while Accelerant has a high ease of use ratings, it also said that they had other ratings that were at least as high, if not higher, for them to get a high rating overall. So at that point, I think it makes sense to turn it over to the panel to discuss their experiences with ease of use.
Okay, thank you so much, Craig. Let me get back to showing my slides. Done 1 second. Here we go. Okay. So I really appreciate, Craig, that great overview of why ease of use is important. It's interesting that many of these areas people tend not to consider initially, but become very obvious once the system is rolled out. So let's now drill down a bit into the underlying attributes of ease of use and hear how our panelists have experienced them personally. So Minden, we'll start with you. One of the first things that you mentioned when we spoke was that it's critical to make sure that the user has a pleasant experience because no one wants to do budgets anyway. So would you tell us why you felt it was critical and what the word pleasant means to you regarding software?
Yeah, I think most people, they have their regular job, and so budgets kind of infringe on that. They would rather take the time to do their normal work than to be having to do budgets. So it is important to make it easy for them. I think pleasant, what I mean by pleasant is it's just not a struggle. It's not so hard to get the information into the machine. It's not hard to learn the system. And, we thought, we had used a product in the past that kind of looked and felt like Excel, thinking that would be easy for users. But when you're talking about something like adding, having all of these rows of accounts on the left side and all these columns going across, it's difficult. People don't know where they are. People have a hard time navigating. So I think the important thing is you got to make it as easy as you can for the users.
Okay. And Cheryl, one of the first things that you mentioned when we spoke was that your yardstick was that the product had to work for the athletic coach. And he's not looking at the computer unless he's looking at game highlights or game stats. So could you tell us why your first consideration was the coach?
They were our lowest common denominator. I know, super users aren't all that good at Excel at times. So I wanted to make sure that if a coach could do it, somebody that's technically savvy would have no problem. So that's how we approach that.
Okay. And Cheryl, a little bit about your decision process in looking for budgeting software. Who did you include and why?
Well, it started with the CFO. He was new to higher education, had come from industry, and had far more sophisticated tools at his disposal. So he wanted to speed up the budget process. So his aspect was getting it faster. I knew what I had dealt with through the years on users, and I knew I could work with any system they put in front of me, but I needed to look at the end users and make sure that it was easier for them to complete their budgets. That was going to speed up the process.
Okay. And you also brought IT into it also, didn't you?
We brought IT in. IT was opposed to any new software. They didn't want to have to support anything else. So we brought IT in to help test the systems we looked at. We also brought in a group of about 12 super users so that they could look at it and let us know if it was, in fact, easy to use and intuitive like we had hoped it would be. IT tried to break it. They couldn't. And the super users became our champions and helped get the message out there how easy it was to use.
Okay, thank you. And Minden, you sort of brought up the fact that you had a solution already in place that wasn't working out. So you already had some insights into what would work best for you and your users. Could you explain your decision process of moving from one software to another?
Sure. So our previous software was not working well for us. We thought it was a little bit overly complicated, and on the other hand, as complicated as it didn't have all the functionality that we felt like that we needed, and we really wanted to make the experience better for the users. So that was what we were looking at. We really did not include the users, though, in choosing a solution, mainly because we felt like they see such a limited portion of the budget. They just know their one piece. We felt like the finance team would be able to assess the ease of use, and we also needed to look at it from our perspective, from the administrator side. How easy was it going to be to implement? How easy was it going to be to maintain the system? Those were some of the concerns that we had. But I think, as we were sitting through demos, as we were looking at the various vendors, we could put ourselves in the position of a user and say, if I was the user, how would it feel? Would it be easy for me to use?
Thank you. So we've identified 10 ease-of-use attributes to look for in software selection, and here's just a little bit of budgeting humor to get us started. So the first attribute is engaging, which means that the software should be pleasant, satisfying to use, well-thought-out visual, and the quality should be appropriate to the tasks, the users, and the context. And the second one is easy to learn, which really allows the users to build on their knowledge without a lot of effort. Since users typically are not in the system every day, it should provide some sort of guidance, allow the user to build upon some standard patterns and be consistent throughout the solution so that users can easily adapt to new functionality, explore new options, and change their own process. And I had a client say to me recently that he felt our software was designed for the visual thinker. So Minden, can you describe what these two attributes mean for you in practice?
Sure. Speaking specifically about Accelerant, one thing I like about it is the budget map, which is mainly the first thing that you see when you enter the system, and it lays out all the accounts, all the items that you're going to need to budget. That actually allows you for quite a bit of flexibility. You can go into any account you want to tackle. It's flexible how you approach your budget. Also, it leads you through. I think Craig mentioned this a little bit, and it's very, very helpful. We tell our users that Accelerant or Budget Pack system is a lot like TurboTax. It's going to ask you, now what do you want to do? Now we want to talk about new hires. Are you going to have any new hires? It leads you step by step by step through thinking through what you need to do in the budget.
Okay, thank you. And Cheryl, can you talk a bit about the organization of the system in terms of the visual interface and why you felt that was easy for your users to get engaged with?
I agree with Minden. It prompts you through, and they didn't really have to think about it. I think it's really difficult to make a mistake. They like the way that it flows and it works them through the system. It's very easy to learn for our users. When we first implemented, I did a 1-hour training session for all the users, which was kind of silly now that I think about it. They were coming from Excel, which is more complicated than anything. But now, even with 10% turnover about approximately in the organization, I will open up the first screen, which has all the account numbers, and it's organized and it's easy to process through. And they usually say within minutes, oh, this is easy, I can take it from here. And they do. So I think it's the visual look of it that helps.
All right. So let's move on to numbers 3 and 4. The third is the effectiveness of the interface, which Craig spoke about, which actually was rated highest by the people on the call today, which means the more informative the interface is, the better the users are able to get their work done and easily. The terminology should be in the user's language, appropriate to the task. And as we talked about, for example, Excel is familiar to many finance teams, but not so familiar for non-finance end users. And then efficiency goes along with that, which is the speed and accuracy in which the users can complete their tasks. So if you have a well-defined interface, there's less time and effort to make navigation choices and action choices. And really, if a system is truly easy to use, you shouldn't even be thinking about the system. So Cheryl, can you just talk a bit about the speed at which the users can complete their tasks?
Well, Budget Pack specifically, because that's what we work in, Budget Pack is really user-friendly for both sophisticated users and people that just want to get it done. We have people that can actually sit down and probably do a budget in a couple of hours because they just put in the numbers. And the system will tell them if it's a reasonable number or not. It will tell them this is 250% more than last year's. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And then for the more sophisticated users, they can build notes and build their budgets within it so that they've got a detailed trail. It's very user-friendly for them. It's efficient and effective, and we get very little errors because they really can see. We also keep several years' worth of history in there that they can drill in and look at, and it just helps them get it done quickly.
Okay, thank you. So Minden, the quote I have on the screen for you is that the users can spend more time thinking about the numbers than thinking about how to use the product. Would you explain that a bit?
Right. It's just so easy to be able to input any data that you want to in the system. They don't have to struggle with where do I do this? How do I get this done? As the system's walking you through it, it's also easy to navigate. You can find your way around very easily. So that helps you to be able to just focus on what is my budget? What do I want to budget? As Cheryl said, you've got multiple benchmarks you can have in the system with past data. That's very helpful. Then you can compare your current budget to what you did last year, or to last year's budget or last year's actual, whatever you're using. That actually helps you kind of analyze your budget as you're inputting it. It's very helpful.
Okay. Let's move on to guided analysis. That's about providing appropriate alerts with a plain English language help. So a system should alert the user to consequences of their actions, such as budget impacts from a new hire or budget amounts way over last year's budget, etc., which Cheryl and you both and Minden both spoke about already. Number 6 is that the system should be geared for a range of users. So it should be powerful for the advanced users, yet easy enough for less sophisticated budget holders. And I like to think of this as layers of an onion. So the most often used and most required elements of the software sit on the outer skin, where they're easily accessible and users can quickly find what they need. But there are complexities, but they're further down the layers of the onion skin for those users who want to deal with the more complex areas. So Minden, let's start with you. Can you talk a bit about why these attributes help the users to think about the numbers that they're putting in?
Sure. So, for instance, we had a situation earlier this year where one of the budgeters was inputting some new hires, and then in Budget Pack shows you this is going to be the estimated impact on your budget of this new hire. And he didn't see the numbers he was expecting to see. That the impact wasn't what he thought it was going to be. So we looked at it and we realized, well, the system's giving this new hire a raise. Is that what you want to do? By having all that information right there at your fingertips as you're budgeting, you can, as I said before, you can actually analyze your budget as you're inputting it and check yourself and give yourself a sense of, is this really what I want to do?
Okay. Cheryl, is there anything that you want to add to that, the guided analysis aspect?
No, I think I think that one is a brilliant tool. I think, well, maybe I am adding things. The green light system is brilliant for our users. I mean, it just says, yep, you've completed this, you may move on. I think that's a really nice tool, and to reiterate that, geared for a range of users, I think I said it a little bit in the earlier, if you want to just put a number in, that's fine. If you want to detail it out and say, this is what I'm building it on, you have the options, the tools in there to do it, so you've always got a handy reference.
Okay, great. So let's move on to reliability and transparency. So a software product can have a great feature list, be supported with excellent help, be easy to use, but if it's not reliable, then those things really are irrelevant. Right? Reliable software isn't going to crash or give you incorrect or invalid information. It's going to make it difficult to take incorrect actions, and you want to be confident that when the numbers roll up to finance, that they're the correct numbers. And the transparency aspect is that, again, that plain English approach to how the system is using the data and producing the numbers. So because people can see as much or as little data as they want and they can dig through, there's a transparency over the whole process because everyone can see all the pieces right at their fingertips. And Cheryl, I love the quote that's on the screen, that you've found that as your end users use the product that was designed to be easy to use, they actually started becoming more sophisticated users. And now that they're comfortable with the system, they're looking for more data and to do more.
Absolutely. I think they've actually started to own their own budgets instead of sending numbers off to a black hole. They now know where it came from, what they were counting on, how it's set up, and they ask for more data. They're getting more sophisticated. They're starting to teach me things. They learn things in the system that I haven't uncovered yet. So it's great.
And Minden, you had a different aspect about this, that you were able to know with certainty what your numbers were. You could look in the system and say, oh, that's because of X, Y, and Z. And that's something that people don't think about when buying software.
That's true. I think if a software solution is extremely complicated, a lot of things happen behind the scenes that you can't see. I guess this goes really to the transparency issue for me, is I can understand what Budget Pack is doing with the numbers. I can go back and I can find the inputs that are leading to those results. That gives me a lot more confidence in the numbers that it's generating. And just to touch really briefly on what you mentioned about plain English, I like that if there's an issue, if there's a potential error or an error, Budget Pack will say to you, this is what's going to happen if you do this. Are you sure you want to do this? And that's exactly the way it'll speak. It doesn't speak in technical jargon. It lets you know this is what is going to happen given the inputs that you gave us. So it's helpful. If you think there's something wrong, you know how to address it.
So moving on to number 9, self-service feature for end users, and really I could say all users, sort of starts to bring all this together. So how much can the user do themselves without having to contact finance? And how much can finance do without having to contact IT or the help desk of the vendor? So there should be a minimum number of clicks to do what you want to do. Users should be shielded from those underlying complexities. Reporting should be quick, easy to get the data out in a format that makes sense. So all aspects of the process should be straightforward, and there should be a simple approach to guiding users through the process. And Minden, you referred to this as your users being able to be independent.
Right. They are very independent. They use the system in their own way. As some people want to just put in an annual amount for every line item. Some people want to detail out every single line item with notes about how they're deriving those amounts. And some people want to use formulas. And some people work collaboratively. Like we have examples of people getting into a conference room with multiple members of their department so they can all work on the budget at the same time. They bring it up on a screen and everybody works on it. So they're very independent. We very rarely get calls in the finance group from people who are lost. Once in a while, we have to guide people, but really very few calls from people who need help with the system. They can really tackle it on their own.
Okay, thank you. And Cheryl, can you also talk to the level of self-sufficiency that you've seen at Northwood?
I agree completely with Minden. They're totally independent. It used to be the whole budget prep season. I spent my time dealing with technical issues. Now I can actually deal with the budget itself. Never get any technical issues. They get in there, and like Minden said, some people will put in the numbers, some people will build a whole supporting worksheet behind it. It's great to spend my time in the data instead of the software.
Okay. And the last attribute for ease of use is a cloud-based solution, which Craig also brought up. The main benefits is it can be accessed from anywhere. Software upgrades are provided by the vendor, so no involvement is needed from IT. Backups happen automatically in a secure data center. And for those vendors who built from the cloud up, as the saying goes, the interface is easier to use as it uses more modern conventions than older systems. So, Minden, you used the word that your company, your people are now spoiled with a cloud solution. Can you talk about that bit?
That sounds so bad that we spoiled it, but
oh, that's great.
I think they're delighted, really, because we're a real estate development company. Primarily, people are out of the office more than they're in it, and some people never work in the office, and some people work from home. And it would just be very difficult to have a client-server approach where they had to have something installed on their desktop. This way, they can access the system from anywhere. I talked about people bringing up the system in a conference room to be able to collaboratively look at the budget and work on the budget, and so the having a cloud-based system has been very helpful for us.
Okay. And Cheryl, you had a slightly different benefit from Minden because your people are mostly in the office anyway. So what was your benefit with moving to the cloud?
Well, we had started out with the server-based, and we moved to the cloud. And although IT started out not wanting a new software, they were very supportive. But it is really nice to just have those updates done and ready to go, and not have to wait for IT's calendar to clear up.
Okay. So let's just cover this topic just a little bit. Craig spoke about this point, and it's not always so clear because most of our clients are coming straight out of Excel and often have never really done software analysis before. So it's the difference between features versus functionality and familiarity versus ease of use. So if one is not well versed in software purchases, it's really easy to get caught up in features and be blindsided. And the familiarity, particularly with Excel lookalike products, because that's what finance is used to, tends to trump ease of use. So Cheryl, can you talk a bit about looking at the whole picture, not just your part, but others as well?
Absolutely. I think that's how we started, with the CFO having the functionality part of it and me looking at the end users and the features. So, at the end of the day, it's the output, it's the budget that we needed that was important. So it was really keeping in mind the users. They like the features. They like the green lights and the opportunity to put in their data. But we needed it to be functional, and we were looking at that as much as the features.
Okay. And Minden, can you talk to the features versus functionality issue?
Sure. I think, when you talk about features, there's going to be a lot of vendors out there who are going to say it can do this, it can do that. You can put in formulas. You can produce a 15-year forecast. There's going to be all these things that sound great to the finance group, and it's not that you necessarily don't need those things, but you really have to weigh the trade-offs with, okay, those are great features, but how much are you going to use them, and how much are the users going to use those things? How much do you need that functionality? Is that something that's critical? And as Cheryl mentioned, what's really critical is being able to get the budgets done, and coordinating that effort is probably the most important thing.
Okay, thank you. So, a little more budgeting humor before we discuss the 4 blind spots to purchasing software. So, blind spots are areas that are often not asked about or not explored enough, but can really turn into a nightmare if ease of use is not a value of that vendor. So these are the 4 main blind spots: implementation, training, maintenance, and help and support. So just briefly, for implementation, is the process fully and clearly documented? How long does it really take? Are all the costs obvious? Who will be doing the implementation? For the training side, how long does it take to train the administrators? How long to train the users? How easy will it be for you to train new people, or do you have to always go back to the vendor and pay to do that? How easy will it be for you to maintain the system? And I'm going to share something that Minden said that you probably can all relate to. I just hate it when you have to wait and wait when you're relying on someone else to do everything. It's quicker when you can control the whole thing. You can decide when to do it, what you're doing, the whole bit, which I think really sums up nicely why ease of maintenance is so important. And then finally, help and support. What is the help desk like? How quickly can you get an answer? How quickly are defects addressed and remedied? So Cheryl, let's start with you. So for companies that are considering purchasing software, what should they be looking for, watching out for in terms of these 4 areas?
Well, I think those should be the first 4 questions they ask when they make a reference call, because when you look at the product with the sales team, you're going to see all the features and functionality. But these are the things behind the scene that take your time and build your frustration if they're not done well. Implementation. Get an honest opinion of how long it really takes. Training. Again, users have limited time. They don't want to spend days and days in training, nor does the administrator. Maintenance, it's cloud-based, so hopefully, that should flow pretty smoothly. Help and support is really important because you're going to mess up, and you need to know how responsive they are. Is it self-service? Can you get to some documentation online? These are the biggest things once you get it, because getting it there is one thing, but keeping it and using it is another.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And Minden, can you share with us your experiences with these blind spots?
Sure, I'd like to share my horror story of implementation just quickly. With our prior vendor, we had many conference calls and emails and discussions. We talked about what we wanted. We sent them reams of information and all of our structures, our accounts, our business units. And come to find out, they were going to outsource the implementation. They didn't share everything with the company that they were outsourcing to. We felt like we had to go back and do a lot over the same ground, and our implementation ended up stretching out, taking a very long time, and it was very, very difficult. So I never wanted to go through that again. And I'll say with Budget Pack, we really didn't have a problem. It was very simple, but that's something you don't always think about when you're sitting in the demo, is how is the implementation going to go? It's something to certainly think about. How much time is this going to take? And think about the time it's going to suck up of your finance team's time. And maintenance is another thing. How are you going to have to dedicate an employee to maintaining this system? That's probably not what you want to do. Everybody has other jobs. You have other things that everybody needs to work on. We've got a chart of accounts that changes daily. I mean, we were constantly adding accounts. We're acquiring new businesses. We've got new business units coming online. So we have a lot of changes, but it's important to me that we were able to maintain the system ourselves, that we didn't need a lot of IT support or vendor support, and we don't. We are able to change the structures in the system, update, make adjustments as needed. It's been very, very helpful.
Okay. Thank you for that, Minden and Cheryl. Okay, so let's wrap up with the benefits of all of these attributes of ease of use. So these are what we believe are the top 5 benefits of implementing a solution that adheres to the principles of ease of use. The first one is that better thinking equals better budgets. So when you have an effective and engaging solution, the users are able to think more deeply, more accurately about their numbers. The second one is increased ownership of the outcome. Users can stand by their numbers, and then everyone up the line understands where the numbers came from and can support them. And studies have shown that poor user adoption is one of the main reasons software projects fail. So if users find a tool too difficult to use, they'll just simply abandon it. The third benefit is the production of honest data, which allows for well-informed decisions and the ability to solve problems quickly and based on reality. So that increased transparency will allow people or cause people to play less games and eliminate the "that's not my number" excuse. The organization overall will have better, more detailed and honest data. And this makes it easier to adhere to the strategic plan and to do more accurate planning and forecasting. And I spoke to one customer recently who, after 2 budget cycles with Accelerant, was able to reduce their contingency amount by 85% because the users were more engaged and produced more detailed and more accurate budgets. The fourth benefit is time savings, and who doesn't want more time in their day? So when a system's simple to implement, you're up and running quickly, you can begin to get value for investment sooner. And training and retraining can typically be handled by the finance team, and then the finance team can control the whole thing. And since the budget season is often not a time that the staff looks forward to, with a system designed for ease of use, there's less frustration, less time wasted with the mechanics of the tool, so that you in finance have more time for meaningful conversations about the things that really matter. And the final benefit is high value for dollars invested. So a key component of great software is the value for the money that it provides. And we believe, and studies have shown, that ease of use affects value throughout the process. For example, when training is easy and can be accomplished in-house or via a simple cheat sheet, the cost of the solution comes down. When you don't have to dedicate a lot of FTEs in finance and IT to maintaining and overseeing the system, the cost comes down. When users can complete their budgets quickly and accurately, the cost of the solution comes down. And when you can solve problems quickly and answer questions quickly, the cost comes down. So let's go back to our panelists for their final comments. So Cheryl, what would you say is the top benefit or benefits of working with a system that values ease of use?
I think it's right there at the top of that page, Joanne. I think we've gotten a much more honest budget. I think people own it a lot more because once they get in the software, you know, it just prompts them through and they're really thinking about what it is they need to do. I think we do far less budget rework because of it, and we get to the end results a lot quicker. But I think it's a much more honest budget.
Okay, that's a great wrap-up. And Minden, what would you say is the top benefit or benefits of working with a system that values ease of use?
I think, too, the better thinking equals better budgets resonates with me. I think people have more time to consider what they're inputting than having to struggle with a system. And time savings is huge, I think. And people are very busy. And as I said, they've got their regular jobs to do. They don't want to spend a lot of time on budgeting. And also, I don't think it's advantageous for the finance staff to spend a whole lot of time struggling being administrators of a system either.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps up the main portion of the webinar. We have a few minutes left, about 2 minutes left for some questions. So let me take a look and see what questions people have put in. Craig, this one is for you. How would you recommend getting senior management to understand how important ease of use is in software selection?
Yeah, that is quite a challenge because if they're getting the results that they want, they don't really know everything that went into it, how hard it was, and actually how error-prone it could be. So you need to make them aware of that by having them attend webcasts like this, and I know this will be available on a replay. Talk to peer organizations that have moved forward, such as your panelists here, attend conferences. So it's really learning from other companies that have done that and industry experts such as ourselves that have experience that could explain what goes on and what the risks are, and also has data that support it. But it's very important that they get educated on this because by default, they probably are not thinking about it.
Okay, thank you, Craig. This question is either for Cheryl or Minden. I'll direct it to Cheryl. Cheryl, when you rolled out the software, did you also change any of the current processes, the way the budget cycle worked or interaction, or what changed when you rolled out the software?
I think we still make changes. We did approach it as a project, as a process improvement. The purchase itself was a process improvement. We do have more opportunity now for officer team review. They can get into the numbers a little easier because before they couldn't even see it until it was compiled and ready to go. Now they have access on the system. We could roll it further down the line, so some of the processes changed where there might be a line item manager who can now get into it, so we've gotten a lot more detail-oriented, and we were able to meet deadlines better because we had a better process in place.
Okay, thank you. I know there are a few more questions. I have time for one more question before we wrap up. Now I'll address this to you, Minden. Do you still use Excel for any part of your planning process?
We use it for one part of our process. We have a shared services group that allocates cost to the other profit centers. And really to do all those calculations, we do that in Excel. We use the My Excel add-in portion of Budget Pack so that we can bring information out of Budget Pack, do some calculations, and push information back into Budget Pack. That's the way we still use Excel.
Okay, very good. All right, so I want to thank Craig Schiff for his very informative presentation. And when selecting software, if you're concerned about making the right choice or just need some guidance, use a firm like BPM Partners. And Craig's contact information is at the top of the screen with a URL for additional guidance. A special thank you to our clients, Minden Dickson from Hunt Companies and Cheryl Warner from Northwood University. All of us at Accelerant thank you both for your investment in our company and our budgeting, forecasting, and reporting product. We wouldn't be us without you. And you can learn more about us at Accelerant.com. We have a number of case studies, white papers, and ebooks available on our site. The employee engagement ebook might be of particular interest to those on the call. Please call us to discuss your budgeting needs. A recording was made of this webinar so that you can listen again or share it. So thank you, everyone, for your time today. Have a great rest of your day.